Hey everyone, it's Matt Wilson, product manager for the Threat Insights group, which is the group that owns vulnerability management. And we're going to be talking about the 13.2 release kickoff items. So let me share my screen and we'll go ahead and get started. So we have two direction items that we're going to focus in on for 13.2. Let's jump right into the first one here. It's kind of a long title, but really this is part of a larger effort. You can see we've broken out multiple different steps to enhance the vulnerability list. So when you run a security dashboard, you see the list view of the vulnerabilities. This is a number of enhancements to it, and the first is really probably the most important, and you could almost say the most urgent for teams, not just on our customer side, but our GitLab teams as well. So we've gotten a lot of great feedback since the 13.0 release of the standalone vulnerabilities, the initial release of that, which brought the category maturity to minimal. And some of that is directly related to that. So what this issue is really all about is adding additional information to these vulnerability lists to make it a lot easier to have some context of, what is the vulnerability without having to drill into each one, and setting the groundwork for future features, which I'll touch on briefly. So let's look at this first one, this first image. So today, you only get these leftmost three columns when you're looking at the security dashboards. And you don't even have all of the information that you see on the screen. So one of the key things that we're going to add here is a line number. Now, it's hard to tell when you're looking at multiple different vulnerabilities if something, especially as you start adding in more scanners, specifically from third parties, so non-GitLab provided scanners. We have a lot of secure scanners, but some customers do like to integrate their own third parties. This can help you identify quickly, is this the same potential vulnerability identified by two different scanners? Or is it maybe the same error that's actually repeated on multiple different lines that may have been picked up by just one scanner? So minor little thing, but it's going to make it a lot easier to tell just from a glance and from one view when you're looking at these items next to each other if they may actually be the same. We're also adding these two columns over here on the right. So the identifier, we're going to pick the top identifier that the scanners report back. So many of the scanners will report multiple IDs, typically in decreasing order of specificity. CVE is usually the preferred one, since that's going to be very specific about that vulnerability. We may also see a CWE, a common weakness, as a more general classification. So if CVE is not available, that may be something you'll see here. And then there may also be proprietary IDs that are not necessarily shared by all the scanners. So for this example, we may have a report from HackerOne from a bug bounty program, for instance. The other column we're going to add is information that's already sort of present in the vulnerability itself, but it's the scanner. So by showing the scanner type, we think that this is going to make it a lot easier to be able to tell the difference between detections that may be the same vulnerability, but have crossed the scanners. So you may have a duplicate identification, or as you start adding in this example, we've used one of our certified third-party security integration vendors. They also provide a container scan in addition to GitLab. So there's a good chance that you may see, if you're running both of them side by side, the exact same items identified. It's also possible that they're going to pick up slightly different things. So again, the idea is to let you know at a glance, is what I'm looking at likely something that was identified more than once, a potential duplicate, or is it more likely to be unique? And then that can be used as a jumping off point to drill into the individual vulnerability pages themselves where there's more detailed information. Coming along with this, since we are adding additional information over here in the columns, we're going to add a new filter type. This is going to be a handy way so you can just drill in and look at only the vulnerability results provided by a particular type of scanner. So we've actually got it broken out not just by scanner type, but if you have multiple same type scanners, you're going to see that as well. So this is really going to give you a lot more fine-grained control over the triage process. Now, I mentioned that this is kind of laying the groundwork for some future changes. If you like to visit this issue, you'll notice that step 1 and step 2, or I should say 1.1 and 1.2, are really incremental improvements in the current experience. The rest of it is actually geared more towards, I mentioned having potentially duplicate findings from either the same scanner or different scanners of the same type working in the same area of the code. Being able to group and sort of combine vulnerability instances into a single vulnerability is going to be something that we look at in the future to really make a lot more efficiencies out of the vulnerability triage process. So baby steps in that direction. We're really laying the groundwork. We're really excited to see already something that just came out, the last release. We're going to be making big improvements to it as we go forward. So to go back to the planning board, the other issue we've got here is linking an existing GitLab issue to a security vulnerability. So today you can, from a vulnerability, you can actually create an issue and it will link it directly. But in some cases, you may have already had an existing issue where maybe a user reported it as a bug, or it came from another internal team somewhere. So this is, again, a kind of a step in a larger direction, but we want to make sure that, go ahead and open these up here. You can start adding one or more additional pre-existing issues. Now, you may notice the first step in this is we're going to move this button down here. I'm going to flip over really quickly to an example dashboard and show what it looks like today. So if I click on this particular vulnerability, we have a create issue button up here, right next to the status button. So we're going to be moving that down here into a new section. So this is going to perform the same functionality. It will create the issue. We've actually got this called out as a separate piece of work. So this is something you may see first. This is going to be the first increment towards that, is moving this create issue functionality directly down here. The second part of that is adding an issue. So if you start adding issues, it's going to ask you to, just like you would link issues, related issues and issues, or adding other epics or issues, this vulnerability relates to the following. So what's nice about this is you may have multiple different issues that all have some relation to this vulnerability that you want to track. So you can just go ahead and add as many as you need to there. Now, behind the scenes, there is actually a unique relationship between what you're going to get from the create issue versus these related issues. And longer in the future, we plan to make some distinctions around the workflow and the behaviors. But for now, it's just going to look like a list of issues. So you can see here, we have 3 different things. The created issue is going to be separate from these related issues as well. So that is our second item on the list here. And that brings me to the end of the focus for this iteration. Now, of course, I always like to mention there's a lot more work that the team puts into this. Now, of course, there are minor defects. There are little cleanup things that the team does to make sure that we're working more efficiently. And there are other features as well. There are going to be minor UX improvements, small tweaks to the UI, things of that nature. So there will be a lot more coming, but these are the 2 main ones we want to focus on and highlight. And we look forward to the 13.2 release. Thanks for watching.